Every week a new case, nothing less than the truth. Before we move on to the next one, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and in the end, tell me what stuck with you the most.
The name Jimmy McGrath came to be remembered as that of a young man with a promising future brutally interrupted. Raul Bay, on the other hand, became the center of a debate about youth violence, the influence of the school environment, and the failures in controlling risky situations involving minors. But what really happened? What were the mistakes and decisions that led to such a tragic outcome? And most importantly, what is the justice system seeking to clarify with this highly anticipated trial? In this video, we will dive into all the details of this story, understand the context, the people involved, and what the authorities discovered. Over the past 3 years, Jimmy McGrath, to many who knew him, was more than just a student. He represented what many parents dream for their children: a dedicated young man, passionate about sports, respected by his friends, and deeply connected to his family. At 17, Jimmy was a talented athlete, played on the school's football team, and despite his young age, already showed leadership and responsibility at school. He was known for his friendliness and the way he treated everyone around him. He wasn't the type to get involved in fights or trouble. On the contrary, he preferred to focus on his studies, his training, and enjoying peaceful moments with friends and family. Teachers, classmates, and neighbors described him as someone always willing to help. With a smile on his face and a kind word, Jimmy also had dreams. He dreamed of going to college, continuing to play football, and who knows, working in sports management in the future. His proud parents always encouraged his plans and closely followed his journey. But what touched people the most was the fact that Jimmy was a simple young man who valued the little things: hanging out with friends, family afternoons, conversations at school. It was hard to imagine that someone with this profile could somehow be involved in such a violent and irreversible situation. Perhaps that's why the impact of his death was even deeper. It wasn't just about losing a promising young man, but seeing the dreams of a family, a group of friends, and an entire community destroyed abruptly and unexpectedly. It's important to remember that. Many times, the cases we see on the news seem distant, as if they were just numbers or statistics. But each of these cases has faces, stories, families. And Jimmy McGrath was exactly that: a son, a friend, a young man full of plans. The night of May 14th, 2022 started like so many others in the small town of Shelton. It was a typical Saturday when students took advantage of the weekend to hang out, chat, and forget school obligations for a few hours. That day, the Lifer family's house was chosen as the meeting point. Jimmy McGrath, as always, was present. He was a familiar face at these gatherings. With his calm and sociable manner, he was welcome almost anywhere. The first moments of the party were exactly as expected: music, laughter, lively conversations, and groups of friends gathering. Everything seemed to be headed toward becoming just another positive memory in these young people's lives. However, the atmosphere began to change with the unexpected arrival of some students from another school in the region. Among them were Raul Allayia Bay and Tyler Dilva. Neither had been invited, and there were rumors of old rivalries between the groups. Their presence caused immediate discomfort. Despite the tension, the party continued. Some young people decided to leave and continue the night elsewhere, and the next meeting point would be Tyler Rich's house, another well-known student famous for hosting parties at his home. The second gathering, in theory, was supposed to be a more controlled environment with only known guests. The idea was precisely to avoid problems, but unfortunately, the plan didn't work as expected. Bay and Dilva, even without an invitation, decided to show up at the second party. According to reports, Raul Bay seemed determined not to let the night end without provoking a situation. Around midnight, they arrived at the location. Tyler Rich, concerned about what might happen, asked them to leave, but the request was ignored. Raul Bay remained near the house's garden, hiding among the plants. At a certain point, someone sprayed him with WD-40, a flammable product used for maintenance. Instead of driving him away, This act seemed to fuel his anger and determination even more. Meanwhile, inside the house, the atmosphere was far from peaceful. Some young people noticed that Bay was carrying a sharp object, which caused apprehension. They tried to warn their friends, but before any safety measures could be taken, the situation got out of control. The confrontation was quick, confusing, and violent. Amid the darkness and chaos, Raul Bay used the sharp object to injure 4 people. Panic took over the place. Screams, running, and the sound of sirens echoed through the neighborhood. Among the injured was Jimmy McGrath. The cut he suffered was deep and hit a vital area of his chest. Friends tried to help him. Emergency services were called, and within minutes, Jimmy was rushed to the hospital. But unfortunately, despite the medical team's efforts, he did not survive. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, the entire city knew. Worried parents called their children, neighbors exchanged messages, and the night's peace had been shattered. Shelton woke up in mourning the next day. What few people know is that night already carried signs that something could get out of control. It wasn't just the unexpected arrival of students from another school that raised alarms, but also the absence of responsible adults supervising the parties, something often neglected at such events. Additionally, later reports indicated there was a history of minor disagreements between some groups, fueled by social media, where teasing and insults circulated freely. The atmosphere of rivalry, combined with alcohol consumption and lack of security, created the perfect recipe for disaster. Another point worth highlighting is the fact that Raul Bay brought a sharp object with him, demonstrating that, in a way, he was already prepared for a possible confrontation. This information, revealed during investigations, raises even more questions about Bay's intentions that night. These moments make us stop and think. How many times can situations that seem small or harmless escalate into something so serious? And how much does the lack of dialogue, prevention, and clear boundaries contribute to tragedies like this repeating themselves? Leave your comment below. Do you believe that Bay and Dilva attending uninvited was already a sign that something bad could happen? Or do you think that if adults had been more present, or if there had been more security, this tragedy could have been avoided? Your opinion is essential in this debate. In the next part, we will talk about the immediate consequences, Raul Bay's disappearance, the police investigation, and the beginning of the search for answers. That night's confrontation wasn't just another isolated episode of teenage violence. It represented the breaking point of a sequence of wrong decisions, communication failures, and lack of control. For the Shelton community, it became clear that the incident could not be treated as an isolated case. The consequences spread quickly and affected not only the families directly involved, but the entire town. Right after the attack, Raul Allayia Bay disappeared. Friends and acquaintances said he vanished from social media, stopped answering messages, and cut off contact with almost everyone. The police immediately began searching, while the town tried to understand what had happened. In the first few days, rumors and speculation emerged. Some said Bay had fled the state, others believed he was hiding on a nearby rural property, and some even thought he would try to leave the country. Public pressure grew by the hour. Social media was flooded with posts demanding justice, while local news outlets intensely covered the developments. Photos of Jimmy McGrath filled timelines, accompanied by messages of mourning and outrage. Meanwhile, Jimmy's family endured the hardest grief imaginable. In just a few hours, they went from an ordinary night to preparing their son's funeral. Tributes, vigils, and displays of support were organized throughout the city. Balloons, flowers, candles, and messages were left in front of the school and the McGrath family home. Teammates, teachers, and neighbors came together to show solidarity, but along with grief came anger. Many residents began demanding explanations. How could such an event happen? There were questions about party security, parental responsibility, lack of supervision, and above all, what had driven Raul Bay to act so extremely. After 4 days missing, on May 18, 2022, Raul Bay voluntarily turned himself in to authorities, accompanied by lawyers. According to the defense, he was in shock and needed time to process the events before surrendering. The police, however, interpreted the disappearance as an attempt to evade justice, which weighed against him at the start of the process. Raul Bay was formally charged by local authorities. Investigations confirmed that he was carrying a sharp object and that the fatal injury to Jimmy McGrath was directly caused by him during the confrontation. Furthermore, 3 other young people were also injured, which aggravated the situation. Even more from that moment on, the case gained national attention. Media outlets across the country reported on the incident, highlighting the victims' profiles, the circumstances of the crime, and the impact the tragedy had on Shelton. The story made headlines in newspapers, on TV, and especially on social media. The episode also sparked important debates about safety at teenage parties, the role of parents and guardians, and the urgent need for policies to prevent youth violence. Psychologists, educators, and youth behavior specialists were constantly interviewed, trying to explain what could lead someone so young to commit such a grave act. There were also questions raised about teenagers' access to dangerous objects, the influence of social media in fueling rivalries, and many young people's lack of preparation to handle conflict situations. Furthermore, discussions emerged about how social events themselves need to be reconsidered in terms of security and structure. The case involving Jimmy McGrath's death did not only affect his family and close friends. The entire town of Shelton felt the weight of the tragedy. The city, accustomed to its small-town atmosphere, found itself plunged into a whirlwind of emotions, outrage, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. In the first few days after the incident, grief overtook the streets. In addition to tributes at the school and the McGrath family residence, churches, parks, and public spaces hosted vigils and prayer events. Social media was filled with emotional testimonials and calls for justice. It didn't take long for campaigns bearing Jimmy's name to be created, aiming to keep his memory alive and demand measures to prevent similar tragedies. Half-mast flags, messages on local radio stations, and stickers with Jimmy's face plastered on cars and store windows became part of daily life. It was impossible to walk through Shelton and not feel the sadness in the air. The city seemed paralyzed by pain and indignation. The debate intensified when details about the organization of the parties that night came to light. The lack of proper supervision, alcohol consumption by minors, poor communication between parents, and how easily outsiders accessed the locations without invitation were strongly criticized. Additionally, the history of small rivalries between school groups, fueled by social media and taunts, was identified as one of the factors contributing to the situation's escalation. Outrage also extended to authorities. Many residents demanded tougher action from the public authorities, calling not only for justice in Raul Bay's specific case, but also for more effective youth violence prevention policies. Community meetings were held, and counselors were pressured for concrete responses. Justice's response didn't take long. In addition to the criminal case against Raul Bay, Jimmy McGrath's family and other involved parties decided to file civil lawsuits. These lawsuits focused on holding party organizers accountable, including parents, guardians, and anyone who, in some way, contributed to creating that unsafe environment. These civil lawsuits opened a new chapter in the case, raising complex questions about social responsibility, the limits of young people's freedom, and the role of adults in supervising such events. For many, it wasn't just about punishing the direct culprits, but also about rethinking an entire culture of permissiveness and negligence. The case also entered local political debate. Councilors and city authorities began discussing changes to municipal laws, including stricter rules for teenage parties, event inspections, and educational campaigns in schools. Some proposals involved limiting the number of participants at private parties, requiring the presence of identified responsible adults, and establishing harsher penalties in cases of negligence. This movement, though controversial for some, received support from many families who saw Jimmy's tragedy as a serious wake-up call about the dangers that can lurk in seemingly harmless situations. By the way, I want to hear your opinion. Do you believe that parents and party organizers should also be held accountable when something like this happens? Or do you believe that, tragic as it is, the blame should fall only on the person who commits the act? Leave your comment below, because your perspective is important and can bring new insights to this debate. In the next part, we will follow the progress of the criminal trial, the testimonies, and the evidence presented during Raul Bay's trial. Judicial process against Raul Allayia Bay was closely followed by the media and the people of Shelton. The town, still shaken by Jimmy McGrath's death, eagerly awaited the trial's start, seeking not only answers, but also a sense of justice. In 2023, the district attorney offered Raul Bay a plea bargain, where the accused could admit partial guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, to the surprise of many, Bay and his defense refused the deal, choosing to face a full trial before a jury. This decision divided opinions. Some believed Bay was confident he could defend himself and clarify the facts. Others saw the refusal as a sign of arrogance or even an attempt to minimize his responsibility. The trial began in June 2025, nearly 3 years after the tragic incident. During the hearings, dozens of witnesses were called to report what they saw that night and the events leading up to the confrontation. The testimonies were revealing. Young people who attended the parties reported the tense atmosphere, the unexpected arrival of Raul Bay and Tyler Dilva. In the moment, everything spiraled out of control. There were accounts of the use of WD-40 spray and Bay's aggressive behavior before the attack. Additionally, forensic experts provided crucial technical reports. Specialists presented findings confirming that Jimmy McGrath suffered a severe chest wound caused by a sharp object matching the one seized from Bay. The experts also indicated that the trajectory and depth of the wound suggested intent, which weighed heavily in the trial. Witnesses also reported that Bay arrived at the second party, showing irritation and aggressive behavior. Some stated that he was already carrying the sharp object before the confrontation, reinforcing the theory that the attack was not merely impulsive. On the other hand, Raul Bay's defense tried to argue that he acted in self-defense, claiming he had been provoked, assaulted, and that the hostile atmosphere left him panicked and afraid. They emphasized that the use of WD-40 spray and verbal threats from other youths left him cornered and scared. However, the prosecution strongly refuted this. They highlighted the fact that Bay attended the party uninvited, carried a dangerous object, and remained at the location even after being asked to leave. To the prosecution, everything indicated that Bay went there already intending to provoke a confrontation. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Jimmy's family followed every session with teary eyes. The pain was visible, but there was also a strong expectation that justice would be served. Neighbors, friends, and townspeople packed the courtroom, and outside, groups held silent vigils in Jimmy's honor. The national media closely covered the case. TV shows, news websites, and journalists specializing in high-profile cases paid close attention to every new detail revealed in court. Raul Allayia Bay's trial became one of the most discussed cases in Shelton's recent history. After weeks of testimonies, technical analyses, and intense debates between the prosecution and defense, the jury reached a conclusion. Raul Bay was found guilty of the attack that resulted in Jimmy McGrath's death and the injuries of other young people that night in 22-2. The sentence, announced in court under the watchful eyes of the community and national media, brought relief to some and at the same time a sense of emptiness to others. After all, no court decision can bring Jimmy back or erase the family's pain. More than Bay's conviction, the case left important lessons. It became clear how small conflicts, if uncontrolled, can escalate into tragic proportions. The need for dialogue between young people, parents, and schools became even more evident. The importance of supervision in social events and the role of authorities in creating safe environments for teenagers were highlighted. The case also sparked deep reflections on youth behavior and the impact of social media on young people's lives. Many of the disagreements and rivalries between groups started online through arguments, provocations, and challenges that unfortunately, spilled over into real life. Experts point out that the Shelton case is a reflection of a bigger issue. A connected generation, but often unprepared to deal with frustrations, differences, and conflict. And the school, family, and social environments need to be alert to these signs. Shelton continues its emotional rebuilding process. For the McGrath family, the pain will never be forgotten, but Jimmy's legacy inspires peace movements, educational campaigns, and actions to prevent such tragedies from happening again. Friends, teachers, and even strangers have created initiatives to raise awareness among young people about the dangers of violence and the importance of dialogue. In the end, what remains is a warning. Thoughtless decisions, fueled rivalries, and lack of boundaries can cost lives. But there is also hope that with information, dialogue, and responsibility, situations like this can be prevented. And for you, what stands out in this case? In your opinion, what needs to change in society so young people can live together in a healthier and safer way? Leave your comment below, because your voice is also part of this transformation. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, the commitment is to bring serious analysis without sensationalism, with responsibility and respect for the victims. See you in the next video.